Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. We are from CS2424A and we will be presenting on KEYNESIAN 1, 2 and 3. But first, let's get to know all the presenter.
My name is Akmal Haziq.
My name is Amirul Mukmin.
My name is Aida Nasuha.
My name is Ain Zuhra.
My name is Dania Suraya.
KEYNESIAN 1, the role of aggregate demand. Aggregate demand is the total expenditure by all sectors, for example household, firm, government, international trade, in economy. Aggregate supply is the total output or national output. Component of aggregate demand are C. Consumption by household, I. Investment by firm, G. Government expenditure, X minus M, which is export minus import equal to net export. Economy is said to be at its equilibrium level of income when aggregate supply and aggregate demand are equal. In other words, it is when GDP is equal to total expenditure. Next, aggregate demand and output have positive relationship. Sectors in economy. There are 4 sectors in economy. The first one is household. Expenditure for household is consumption. When consumption increases, the aggregate demand will increase and the output will increase too. The second one is firm. Expenditure for firm is investment. When investment increases, the aggregate demand will increase and the output will increase too. The third one is government. Expenditure for government is expenditure and revenue. When government expenditure increases, the aggregate demand will increase and the output will increase. But for government revenue, when the government revenue increases, the aggregate demand will decrease and the output will decrease. The last one is intertrade. There are 2 activities in intertrade, which is export and import. When export increases, the aggregate demand will increase and the output will increase too. While for import, when import increases, the aggregate demand will decrease and the output will be decreased. Determining equilibrium income. There are 2 approaches to determine equilibrium income. The first one is ADAS approach. The second one is investment saving approach. For ADAS approach, equilibrium level of income is determined at point A, where C plus I plus G curve or aggregate demand curve is equal to aggregate supply curve. Inflationary gap happens at the vertical distance when aggregate demand exceeds output. For investment saving approach, the saving and tax line intersect the investment and government spending line and equilibrium level of income is determined. Next, when aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply, businesses will increase their output. Think back to our manufacturing business. If their customers are making more and more orders, the company will increase their production, so the output will increase. In the inverse situation, when aggregate demand falls short of aggregate supply, the manufacturing company built too much product and cannot sell it all. The company inventory will accumulate in the warehouse, which increase its overhead expenses, reduce its cash, and hurt profit. The company must decrease its production. So, Y will be decreased. While for aggregate demand equal to aggregate supply, no tendency for national income to change. Equilibrium is achieved. Changes in equilibrium income. When consumption, investment, government spending, and export increase, tax and import decrease will lead to increase in output. For aggregate demand, aggregate supply approach, the equilibrium is at point A. Increase or decrease as shown component above lead to aggregate expenditure to shift outward. The equilibrium income will increase from A to B and output will increase from Y0 to Y1. For investment saving approach, the beginning at equilibrium A, the investment plus government spending curve will shift upward. Equilibrium income increases from point A to point B and output increase from Y0 to Y1. When consumption, investment, government spending, export decrease, tax and import increase will lead to decrease in output. For ADAS approach, the increase or decrease as shown component above lead to aggregate demand curve to shift downward. Equilibrium income will decrease from point A to point B and output will be decreased from Y0 to Y1. For investment saving approach, beginning at equilibrium A, the saving plus tax schedule shift outward. The equilibrium move from A to B, and the output will be decreased from Y0 to Y1. Next, let's proceed to fiscal stabilization policy. Fiscal policy is the use of government spending and tax policy to alter the economy. When deflation occurs, the aggregate supply will exceed aggregate demand. There will be a shortage of aggregate demand. The recession will occur. In order to increase the aggregate demand back, expansionary fiscal policy will be applied through increase in government spending or decrease in tax. When inflation occurs, the aggregate demand will exceed aggregate supply. Expenditure will exceed the production capacity, and the price of product will be increased. In order to decrease the aggregate demand back, the contractionary fiscal policy will be applied through decrease in government spending or increase in tax. For ADAS approach, beginning at equilibrium point A, decline in autonomous investment expenditure will shift the aggregate demand downward to point B. Increase in discretionary government spending, G, will shift back the aggregate demand to point A. For investment saving approach, the equilibrium is at point A. Decline in autonomous investment expenditure will shift the investment plus government spending curve downward to point B, and the income will be decreased. Increase in discretionary government spending will shift the line upward and moving equilibrium to point A, and the income will increase.
KEYNESIAN 2, Money, Price and Interest, LM curve. So LM curve shows the equilibrium in the money market, which requires that the real quantity of money supply that is determined by central bank and not affected by real interest rate is equal to real quantity of money demand that depends on income and interest rate, derived LM curve. So graphically, it is a combination of income and interest rate that equilibrate the money market. As we can see from the graph, increase in income will shift the money demand to the right, and equilibrium in the money market occurs at higher interest rate. Thus, the LM curve slope upward to the right. There are two factors that will shift the LM curve, which is change in money supply and change in money demand. Example for change in money supply is increase in nominal money supply and decrease in price level. Example for change in money demand is increase in expected inflation and decrease in wealth. This, for example, that will shift the LM curve downward to the right. Next, interest elasticity of money demand. Slope of LM curve depends on money demand curve. When money demand curve is steep, there is a small percentage change in demand and interest rate increase in large amount. Thus, the LM curve will be relatively steep and vice versa. Let's move to IS curve. IS curve shows the equilibrium in the good market. It is the point intersection between saving and investment. Derive IS curve. Graphically, it is combination of income and interest rate that equilibrate the good markets. The graph shows that decrease in income will shift saving curve to the left, and equilibrium occur at higher interest rate but lower investment and income. Thus, the IS curve slopes downward to the right. There are a few factors that will shift the IS curve, which is change in government spending, change in tax, and autonomous change in investment. Interest elasticity of investment. Let's take a look at low interest elasticity of investment, which is the blue curve of I in graph. Investment is interest inelastic. A fall in interest rate causes smaller in investment, leading to a small increase in output. When investment curve is steep, the IS curve is steep, and vice versa for high interest elasticity of investment.
Moving on to Keynesian aggregate demand and supply. Demand is a total demand for all finished goods and services in an economy. First, for eddy curve, assume nominal money supply is fixed. This will lead the price to increase and shift LM curve to the left. Interest rate will increase while investment and output will decrease. Next, monetary policy. For side note, monetary policy will only affect money supply or money demand. As you can see from ISLM curve, increase in money supply will shift LM curve to the right at fixed price. This will increase output at the same time. Therefore, they will also increase and shift eddy curve to the right. The last one for demand is fiscal policy. For side note, fiscal policy will only affect tax and government expenditure. Expansionary fiscal policy will increase government spending and decrease tax. When tax decrease, consumption and output will increase. Therefore, aggregate demand will increase and eddy curve will shift to the right. Supply is total quantity of output firm will produce and sell in an economy. For positive eddy shock, increase in eddy curve will result from increase in either consumption, investment, government spending, or net export. We need to increase price to avoid disequilibrium. Shortage will happen when demand increase and price remain. Increase in price will shift eddy curve to the right. This will lead to increase in GDP, price level, and inflation, while unemployment will decrease. While for negative eddy shock, decrease in eddy curve will result from decrease in either consumption, investment, government spending, or net export. We need to decrease price to avoid surplus happens due to decrease in output. Decrease in price will shift eddy curve to the left. This will result to decrease in GDP, price level, and inflation, while unemployment will increase. Next is positive AS shock. Decrease in production cost shift AS curve to the right. We need to decrease price to avoid surplus happens. Therefore, output and GDP will increase while unemployment and price level will decrease. For negative AS shock, increase in cost of production shift AS curve to the left. We need to increase price to avoid shortage. Stagflation occur when SRAS decrease. Therefore, leads to decrease in output in GDP while increase in unemployment and price level. For monetary and fiscal policy effect, increase in money supply or government spending will shift eddy curve to the right. Price and output will increase too. Last for not least is for raw material price and expected price level. Increase in price of raw material will shift AS curve to the right. Output will decrease and price level will increase. But as supplier understand the rise in general price level, expected price will rise. Therefore, AS curve will shift to the left again and another decrease in output and increase in price level.
We proceed with general equilibrium of ISLM model. General equilibrium is the point of intersection E between IS curve and LM curve. At this point E, there is no excess demand and excess supply. Therefore, there is neither upward nor downward pressure on the output or on interest rate. The equilibrium output is YO, while equilibrium interest rate is RO. The points on the left of the LM curve is excess supply of money, while the points on the left of the IS curve is excess demand of output. Changes in general equilibrium. Firstly, monetary influences, which is things or factors that shifts the LM curve. For example, changes in money supply and money demand. Secondly, real influences, which is things or factors that shifts the IS curve. For example, changes in government expenditure or taxation. Next, policy effect of ISLM model. Refer to the graph. If there is an increase in government spending, IS curve will shift to the right from IS1 to IS2. This will increase money demand, causing interest rate to also rise from R1 to R2. Hence, investment is reduced. Output will also increase from Y1 to Y2. Next example would be if there is a decrease in tax. When tax decrease, consumption will increase. The IS curve will shift to the right from IS1 to IS2. This will increase the money demand, causing interest rate to rise from R1 to R2. The output then will also increase from Y1 to Y2. The final example would be if there is an increase in money supply. which also known as monetary policy. Bear in mind, monetary policy has no effect on IS curve. Money supply is increased by lowering the reserve requirements for banks, which allows them to lend more money. When this happens, LM curve will shift to the right from LM1 to LM2. Interest rate will fall from R1 to R2. This will lead to the increment of investment. Output will also increase from Y1 to Y2.
In Keynesian System 3, we will learn how government applied certain policy to cure certain macroeconomics problem, such as recession, unemployment, and inflation. Next, we will also learn how policy effectiveness are determined by the change in real output associated with the policy change. Policy are considered effective if the impact of change in the real output are big. First, let we discuss how the policy will affect in the slope of IS curve. For the monetary policy, for the flat IS curve, when the LM curve shifts to the right, the interest rate decrease in a little, but output will increase a lot. Compared to the steep IS curve, when the LM curve shifts to the right, interest rate will decrease a lot, but output also will increase in a lot. So for the conclusion, in monetary policy is more effective when IS curve is flat, where the interest is elastic. Next, we will see how the fiscal policy will work. For the flat IS curve, when the IS curve shifts to the right, for the both interest rate and output will increase in only a small amount. But compared to the steep IS curve, when the IS curve shifts to the right, both of the interest rate and output will increase in a lot. So for the conclusion, fiscal policy is more effective when the IS curve is steep. This is because the interest is inelastic. So let's we proceed how policy effects for the slope of LM curve. First, let's take a look for the monetary policy. In the flat LM curve, when the LM curve shifts to the right, the interest rate will decrease in a little, and also for the output will increase in a little. But in steep LM curve, when LM curve shifts to the right, interest rate will increase a lot, and also for the output also will increase in a lot. So for the conclusion, monetary policy is more effective when the LM curve is steep, where the interest is inelastic. For fiscal policy, for the flat LM curve, when the LM curve shifts to the right, the interest rate will increase in a little, but output will increase a lot. And for the steep LM curve, when the LM curve shifts to the right, the interest rate will increase a lot, and the output only increase in a little. So here the conclusion is fiscal policy is more effective when the LM curve is flat, where the interest is elastic. So now we will proceed to the liquidity trap. What is liquidity trap? Liquidity trap is when a situation is defined in which a central bank massive subsidies, which is money injection into the private banking system, fail to lower the interest rate and thus stimulate economic growth. Due to the high interest elasticity of the money of demand, the money demand and LM curve are flat. So, an increase in the money supply will not stimulate spending. Thus, monetary policy cannot apply to stimulate output. Now, we will proceed to the last subtopic in this chapter, which is crowding out. The definition for the crowding out, which is the problem that might occur due to the government borrow money to enhance the economy, which is increase in government spending, whereby can cause of declining in increased output. The methodology of crowding out is where the government will selling bonds and reduce the taxes, which is cause the result increase in government spending will reduce the taxes, and also increase the interest rate, whereby will decrease the investment and also will increase in aggregate demand. Crowding out of ISLM curve. When increase in the government spending, this will reduce the taxes, which is apply the expansionary of fiscal policy, causes an increase in output and increase in interest rate. Here we can see three types of IS curve, which is flat IS curve, steep IS curve, and vertical IS curve. These three different curves will cause three different situations when we increase the interest rate, and where the cost of output and the investment have a different situation in different curve. So for the conclusion, the flatter the IS curve will increase magnitude of the crowding out. Thus, it will increase in amount of declining in increase in income, or vice versa.